Hello world, Great Giza Pyramid. Today we're going to be looking at some of the construction and configuration of the Great Giza Pyramid, this structure right here, which you can use those GPS coordinates you see there and pull it up on your own favorite mapping software and get better quality pictures of it if you can. Otherwise, you're welcome to go to files.greatgizapyramid.com and actually pull up this presentation and look at higher quality images on your own screen as opposed to looking at it on the video. Now you can see a little bit of the rings. You can see rings around here at different levels. And I'm going to point out to you what they are in just a few seconds, but I do want you to get a visual representation of them. Now this next picture is going to be taken from this area here, the southwest side of the structure. Boom, there you go. And you can here even see the difference in gradients. You can see the steps here are not as steep as the steps here. This one section has fairly steep steps, and then there's a whole major configuration of the steps, and you can see them a lot better here on this graph that was made back in the 1800s, where they painstakingly measured each and every elevation and deviation of the steps and came up with this cool little graph. Now you can see there that there are areas where there are thicker steps and then thinner steps, and that is why you can see the difference in gradients. In fact, I pointed out to you on this where you have thicker steps right here, that's right above the 35th level. That would be this area right here where you have thicker steps. And, well, what all that does is it really creates any brush discharge static electricity that falls upon the top of the structure to be coaxed to the top of the structure, where normally it would be maintained upon the structure like a big Van de Graaff generator. But in our wisdom, we vented that static electricity off using this antenna that you see there, which vents the static electricity up into the atmosphere, getting it off of the structure so that it doesn't annoy people if and when they climb the structure, which you're not allowed to climb the structure anyway, but, you know, out of sight, out of mind. Here's a picture of the rock garden on the top of the structure. You can see it's a different color, and in fact, this one rock that's a unique color all itself is said to be the center of the known continent, the center of the land mass, something we were not able to calculate up until we got the GPS satellites up there into space. And when we calculated it and found it to be that spot, we scratched our head and said, wow, these people must have known something that we just figured out ourselves. Well, let's continue. This is the internal configuration. Show you this because a lot of people I find that I bicker with what the internal configuration is, and this particular map is fairly accurate, so I like to refer to it. It was done up by John Cadman. He has his own idea on what this structure actually did. I don't agree with his findings because he needs to append pieces to the structure in order to make his system work, where I like to take the structure as it sits and actually say what the structure would do as opposed to what we can reconfigure it to do. But that's a whole other story for a different video. When we line up the different elevations, we put the tallest step, the 35th step, on the same elevation as the top of the Queen's Chamber, and of course ground level to ground level. We see some pretty interesting correlations with where the steps are and what they relate to. Now this is not to the right size. This is not to scale. So you can't really take this to heart, but you can still see some of the correlations, how it does relate. And when I get one to scale, I'm sure it'll even be more interesting the way that things match up and marry. Here's another representation looking at it, again, not to scale, but you can still see how that sweeping pattern would maintain the static to the top of the structure, everything above the leads that come out of the King's Chamber. This is the entrance I was talking about. You can see we enter now below the entrance right there and go through what is the Forge Tunnel or the Thieves Tunnel. But this is the main entrance. It's got some markings up here. I'll tell you that's part communication. And when we go into what the structure does, I can allude to you how to read those. But if you really want to know, I'd start by looking up Carl Monk and his video series, The Code, which really details how the communication between the people of this time were being done. Now, here is the dimple as I was referring to, and it is on the opposite side, the south side, where the entrance is on the north side. I am almost of the belief that the entrance may have looked like that prior to us digging it out, but it may have been nice and smooth and hidden, as they like to say, which brings me to the question, why wouldn't they have attacked this dimple as opposed to attacking below the main entrance? But, well, they did what they did. We have to just work with the facts. Here's another picture of the entrance. You can see the markings right above it, and we'll get into what and how those relate to things when we get into the functioning of the system. But I just want you to see them so that when I refer to them, you know that they do exist, and I'm not just making up random ideas here. I do not believe this configuration with any swinging door or anything. I believe that the air would be forcing its way out as the water would be forcing its way in, which would create a back pressure. It doesn't need any physical moving doors or anything of that. We like to put a door in there because, well, that's part of the tomb theory, which I do not subscribe to. This would be the descending chamber, and you can see this is, again, from the 1800s, and you can see the sediment that was left from the downflow, and you can also kind of see where there would be a nice flow. You don't have to be a aquatics expert or hydraulics expert to understand what pattern a flow, a little stream, would leave in a pile of dirt, and we'll get into that when we talk about the functionality of the structure. But here's the subterranean chamber, and here in the subterranean chamber you can see how it's configured. You got a very large room here, what they like to call the dead-end shaft, the pit that's very deep. You got this little bottleneck that goes up to the grotto area you saw in the main picture. These are all things that are worthy of paying attention to. And when we get into it more, you're going to notice how the elevation of this elbow relates to some of the markings within the fins. And again, that's because I do believe it's communication. And if you don't actually take the time to actually see that the elevation refers to the elevation within here and how things relate to each other, then you don't even see the communication because, well, it was never pointed out to you. This area up here, there is a little bubble that goes into the roof area. No, it does not lead anywhere. It is kind of a dead end, but it is functional when we talk about what the structure does when it's reassembled and put back into its proper state. There's a kind of a picture of it. I don't totally agree with it because this right here actually has a L-shaped end. I know that more because I have the actual picture of it here in a second. Oh, what I was going to talk to is the dead end shaft here. They like to say it's a nice straight narrow shaft. I'd like to tell you, you can see right there in this picture that it's ribbed kind of like an inchworm or a garden worm. It is not a straight shaft as the descending and ascending shaft are. There's a pattern to that. This becomes more relevant when we get into the function and what is occurring within the structure, but seeing it makes it so that it is planted into your mind, so when I discuss it you say, oh yeah, it was that way, wasn't it? Here is how I was talking about how there's a cutout that comes in front of it, not shown in the drawings. Drawings are nice, but pictures are better because they don't leave things out. Here's the back entrance, or the back bubble I was talking about. This goes up a couple of feet and is just a big open area. Again, that goes more towards the function and what it occurs within this room, and that is for a later discussion. Right now we're just going over the physical configuration. If this gentleman here was to turn around and look down the hallway, this would be the view that he would see. You notice that here it's smooth for the first about third of it and then rough for the 2/3 of it. Again, this goes back to the functionality and what's occurring. I discussed that in some of my other videos, but I want you to put eyes on it so you see that it is actually configured that way. When I discuss it in my videos and I say, oh, this is the way it's configured, you don't say like, is it really configured that way? Well, here it is. You're looking at it with your own eyes. I didn't make up the configuration, just pointing it out. Now, what we're going to look at now is down into this hole here. Down into that hole, there's a rock sitting on a little shelf. fact, I believe it's that shelf that this gentleman is standing on, otherwise he'd be falling down there. But he's down there, standing on that little shelf where the rock is, that little rock right there. That is one of 3 granite rocks within the lower section. Got one there, one in the hallway, which we're going to look at in a second, and one in the grotto, which I believe we get to in a few moments here. Now here is the one that's in the hallway I was talking about. It used to sit right where you see it there. You can see it again in this particular spot. Now it's been pushed over from one area to the other. It's been moved to the other side of this section. Exactly why it was moved? Well, I think they were looking for treasures because they were treasure hunters. But in its original time, it was located in this spot right here where you can see the scarring against the wall where it was sitting. In fact, you can see that mark there is the same as that mark there, only the rock is gone. Now the rock is located over here, which would be, if this is the hallway, it would be over here to the side, or right behind this picture over here. But that is the configuration. We'll get into that again when we get into the function of the machine, but I just want you to know its original configuration and how it was all set up. This is the descending shaft, this area right down here. You can see it was nice and smooth. Everything was good. Down at the bottom, right below the area, right where it's pointing at it, before that little J-hook where it goes up to the top, there is roughness across the top. Now, when we get into what the structure is doing, you'll understand how that got to be so deformed from use. Here we have other things I'd like to point out. I will point out to you this rock right here and these rocks. They have since been removed to make it much more easy for tourism, but at the time they were there, and we will discuss what they did. But when I point them out, people say, well, they don't exist. Well, here's a picture of them existing. So when I discuss them and refer to it, you know that they did exist, and that is the way that the system was designed. They dug this out to get up into follow the path up to the grotto area. Currently, this is all filled in now with dirt. They probably don't want people going up there without their permission, get hurt, sue them, things like that. And you're stuck up there for a week, no one knows it, and they start smelling something funny. They don't really want that. With the new exploration of this new hidden room, it'd be nice if they sent the little blimp they want up there to check out the grotto area up in here. Maybe even get a nice visual of this whole conduit right here so that we can see if there's any other markings or strange things in there that don't really fit the tomb dogma theory and would kind of help me with my understanding of the system. But we'll worry about that at a later time. I just want you to know the configuration. Here's the grotto mapped out. We got pictures of it right there, physical pictures. This picture is taken with the guy kneeling right there. The other one, somebody's over on this side. You got one guy there and the other guy here. Those are these two. One guy's on the far side of the pit. Boom, boom. This guy's basically where that gentleman is standing or kneeling and taking a picture of this gentleman. So it gives you references to what you're looking at. This rock right here is the same as this rock right here. So you get the idea of what you're looking at there. More when we get into the physical function and configuration of what's going on here, but we'll get to that again in later videos. Another picture of it. I do believe that's about where the water level would be. I think the water level would actually hover about this height because water would fill into here, and then once it fills in, it can't fill in anymore because of the way this is shaped. It creates a pressure bubble, so it maintains it. Here's the king's chamber. I'd like to point out to you this particular ring right here, this elevation mark. It's consistent throughout the entire configuration of the king's chamber. That gives us a reference point. You have across the wall here, across the wall here, and we're going to look at it in a few seconds in the what they like to call the thieves' tunnel. But in the king's chamber, they've hence patched over the hole in the floor. There's a metal plating. If you get up there and you step on it, it's metal plating, but that's okay because they don't want you to know that there used to be a hole, because that hole doesn't make any sense in the tomb dogma theory. But you can see lots of pictures of it from the past. There's a picture of the one entrance. Here's a picture of the hole I was speaking about right there. We got better pictures of it right here where somebody's nice enough to stick their camera under the bottom of the metal grating, and you can actually see that it goes down pretty far. That's the hole. So let's go on to the next step of the pyramid. All right, so we've gone over the hole in the floor that they like to hide or not talk about, out of sight, out of mind. Now let's talk about the conduits that come out of the king's chamber. This right here is that score mark I was telling you about, and you can see it cuts right through the middle of this. The one on the other side is just below it, and the one that's in the thieves' tunnel that we'll get to in a second, we'll talk about that. This is at the exact same elevation as the conduit, not the conduit, the box that's in the room. Now this is true. It is squared, the conduit that goes up to the north-south side of the structure is squared, and then it becomes oval the last like it says 8 feet? Yeah, it is 8 feet, yes. And this right here is an inaccurate drawing. It is actually more like a catcher's mitt. We just looked at the picture of it, and right there is a better picture of it right here. It comes out. It is not just the shape that they show here. Otherwise, he would be able to lie in it. It opens up like a big catcher's mitt. We'll get to that in a few minutes. We're also going to talk about this. This is the tunnel that I was talking about, the thieves' tunnel. We'll get to that in just a few seconds. This is the one and only conduit that comes out to the surface of the structure. This one does not, neither do the two that come out of the queen's chamber. They do not breach the surface of the structure. If someone can find me a picture where they do, I'll change my words. But until then, that is the exit of that conduit to the outside world, and I'm sticking with it because it's got a picture. It does exist. Now, coming out of the king's chamber, we go down that tunnel, and we're going to go to the side here. We're going to see a few other pictures first. This right here is the section. It's not even shown in this diagram, out of sight, out of mind. You know, they put a door in front of it. They don't want you to think about it because it doesn't make any sense. But like I said, it's right there. Today, it has a grate in front of it, but either way, it still does exist. It is the person who took this photo is in that area, and if this person, who is actually the same person, here he's facing towards you, here he's facing towards the king's chamber, but right to the side of him right there is where the entrance is, right there, that spot right there. Go in that spot, and you have a nice hallway down there. Now, here's what I was talking about. This is right above this score mark. And if we took a very bright light and shined it down there, this gentleman was kind enough to show using a compact, a little mirror, that light actually goes down and can be seen from inside of here. That shows you that this is a connected conduit. That, again, comes in more relevant when we talk about the function and how the machine is working. But what I want you to do is actually keep in mind how it is configured, because the configuration is, we don't have to go back and bicker about the configuration. Oh, it doesn't really made like that. Yes, it is. I just showed you pictures of it. This right here is an area that they've filled over. Even here they pen it over, in its configuration. And they like to show you this shape being a nice semi-oval shape up there, when it's not. The pictures are much better. Here's what I was saying, how they capped it over. Again, out of sight, out of mind. They really don't want you to see this because it doesn't make sense to their tomb theory. Of course, when I get into telling you how to read the structure, how to read the communication within the structure, it's kind of like somebody plastering over the Roman numerals and saying, oh, we just thought they were like hash marks or something. We didn't know what they were. So again, here is the same rock that we're looking at right there. They show it as a flat. They do point out in here that the boss mark is slightly off center. This is the boss mark I'm referring to, physically exists. It's on the back side of this. This would be looking at the south side of the rock. This is the north side of the rock. Here we are looking at the south side of the rock. You can see it's, if this was to bring it across level, like that one picture showed, and one side of it does scoop over, where the picture showed both sides scooted over. And if you notice, it's just off center before it starts dripping. In fact, the boss mark is right here in the structure. Now, again, this becomes much more relevant when we look at the functionality. And one thing I like to point out is right here, you can see a little bit of marking. See that? That's because I believe something was resting towards the back of it. And again, that's where I have a little bit of speculation when we go to recreate the system, the area that they damaged when they came through here, to recreate the structure and the function of it. We'll go over that. But I do want you to see that there is markings there, that something was there. So when I talk about it, you don't say, hey, you're just making this stuff up, pulling stuff out of thin air. This is the funnel. Up until the mid-1800s, it was a funnel. They patched it over so that Grammy, when she was up there doing a tour of this magical tomb, didn't slide down here and go for a, roll down the Grand Gallery and break all of her hips. There you go. It's all patched over. They put stairs in there now, made it much more friendly for the tourism. But before that, it didn't have that marking. But here you go. You can see how we've patched it over. Nowhere near the workmanship of the original thing. The door that I was talking about is right here. Goes into the King's Chamber down in there. These are just more current day pictures of the structure. Here's the Grand Gallery we're talking about. Very long structure. Very uniquely configured. I'll go into that more when we go into the functionality, but I just want you to put eyes on it so when I do talk of it, you have some reference to what it looks like and how it's shaped. You can always refer back to these, or find additional ones. Of course, if anybody comes up with photos that they think show something differently, send it to me. I'll look at it. I'll evaluate it, as long as it's not something where we've patched or changed things over time, because we have made changes to the configuration of the structure, and it's the original configuration is the one that I'm most interested in, not the changes we've made over the past century or two. This gentleman here is right at this area here, what they like to call the step in the Queen's Chamber passage. And if you look, you can see the watermark along the lines, along the wall. Now, people like to say those are people's hands marks. Well, why would the hand mark be all the way down the entire wall? And I'll show you other pictures where it goes around the circumference of the Queen's Chamber as well. This is the well shaft that goes to the grotto. They've boxed it over. In the past, it was chained over with a little fence thing there. I'd like to actually get real pictures of it. Anybody has real pictures, I'd much rather real pictures over the drawings. Of course, they've capped it over so people don't fall down there by mistake. Understandable. But real photos would be much more... take away some of the guesswork as to what this is. I'd really like the most truest configuration I could get of the structure. Here's the Queen's Chamber. I was telling you about the watermark. You can see a little bit here. You can see it again in this black and white. Same thing. You can see it along the edge there, and you can see it along the wall here. It is a definite watermark around the entire structure. But again, that gets into the function, and we'll look at that later. I just want you to be aware of it, so when I point it out to you, when I'm talking about the configuration, you say like, oh yeah, I remember it being there. Now I'll give you the justification for it. They've covered over the floor here, just like they covered over the floor in the King's Chamber. It used to be soft floor here. You can see it in both of these older pictures. And I would bet you that if they dug down here, pulled the soft dirt out, you'd find a configuration much like the fins in the Subterranean chamber, because it's communication, and they wanted you to be able to get to it, but oh well. This, although it says north, you can see by the map here, this being the north side where the entrance is, this is actually the south conduit. This is the south side. This one says south, but it's actually the north conduit. It was the south conduit that had the crack in the wall, which I will tell you, if you take a look at that, it's an electrical arc. It's an electrical arc where electricity went through the rock to the conduit behind it, leaving a score mark, or a scorched mark, of the electricity going through it. It's like an arc burn. We drilled through that crack to find the conduit behind it, and then, assuming there was another one, we seeked out and found the other one. Now, I'd also like to get pictures around this entire rim, because I believe the top section here may have had a slight crack and been opened based on how I believe the system was working. I don't believe it was actually a smooth thing. There may have been a little bit of opening, but that's speculation. That is not fact at this point. Just working on that. I'd like to find out if we can actually find that, because they say they found this after finding that one. I think it may not have been so discreet. Either way, that's for later. Here again, you can see the watermark here. In the past, they've sent up many rovers. This is one. They've probably sent up 2 or 3 different types. There are videos you can find where they had different configurations. When they get up there, they find these leads up at the top, about 100 and some feet up into there. It could be less than 100. I don't have the exact measurements. This one is from the north conduit. This one is from the south conduit. This one is the one that had the crack in it. Much more flow of energy through there. Hence, there's more wear on those leads. We'll really get into those more when we talk about the function of the structure. Here's a picture from the 1800s. You can see this was before they even knew there was a hole in the floor. You can't tell me that somebody dug that out and then put the dirt back there and raked it over to make it look all smooth and stuff. And the same thing with this. They didn't pull it out and then shove it back in. It was in there initially. When they found this structure, this is how they found it. These rocks were here. In fact, I'll tell you that these rocks come up to and just would have breached the level of the water there. And again, this has to do with the function. But know that these rocks exist. These rocks didn't fall off of here. You don't see an empty spot there where they rolled off because they dug it out. They were here initially when we found it. These are not pieces that somebody drug down from the antechamber area and had it fall down the Grand Gallery and then dragged it into here. You don't see drag marks. These were in this room initially when we found it prior to the 1800s. That is just the way it is. You have to accept these. I'll give you justification for them when we talk about function, but they did exist. One thing that's really important is the way the patterning is here. Just consider a piece of condensation that would fall upon this rock here and roll down. When it hit here, would be pushed this direction before it dripped. And I'm going to suggest to you that the major point where they want it to drip is actually right here, so that it would fall straight down here, and that drip would then be in the perfect spot, the glory hole, if you want to say it. Right here is more water marking, you can see, right around the whole edge of the room. It's, very evident if you take the time to look for it. And they're not hand marks. Don't want to walk around at the same elevation and put hand marks. Now, the whole conduit that goes back here is right down here, and all those steps, the deviation of how these go, they're not squared, and they're not chiseled out with a chisel. They were fabricated that way because when you look at it, there's communication. Each one of these lines, here comes out, that lines up with one of the elevations of the niche. Same thing with each one of these. They would all line up with something. In fact, some of them would line up with the communication that is within that conduit that we've, that area that had the soft floor that we've since covered over. Why? Well, because they weren't looking for communication. They didn't believe it, so they were never looking for it. Anyway, I hope I've drummed up some interest. Here's many ways you can contact me or follow me, and I will continue to make more videos. And if I've drummed up some curiosity, I urge you to please look at some of my other videos where I'll expand on how these unique configurations all come to play to make one very large system. In fact, in reality, this is just a piece of the system because all of the structures upon the plateau all work in concert. Each one does not work by itself. They weren't made at different times. They were all designed to be used together as one system. And I'll be glad to expand on that. Anyone who doesn't believe me, well, look at it for yourself. Tell me where I'm wrong. I'll be happy to take into consideration as long as you're working within the laws of reality, physics, what does exist. You also notice that this area right here, which seems to, it's at the same elevation. It's all at the same elevation as this one conduit that goes down, the one that slices through there, the one. It's all pinpointing one particular elevation because that is I'll suggest a reactionary level. there is something occurring there.